Don't react.
Wait until your mom leaves. That's what my husband whispered after brushing dust off something I never imagined existed. A discovery buried in the attic, in a box sealed for decades, that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. My mother's betrayal, my father's absence, and the lie that stole my childhood, it was all hidden up there.
And once I saw it, I knew I couldn't let her get away with it.
If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal from someone who was supposed to protect you, this story will hit hard.
Grab a seat.
Because what started with a simple attic cleaning turned into the ultimate payback for a mother's darkest secret. If you believe in karma and justice, smash that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll hear all year.
It started on a rainy Saturday afternoon.
The kind of day where thunder hummed through the walls and the rain whispered against the windows, asking to be noticed. My husband, Marcus, had volunteered to help clean my parents' attic. They were downsizing and asked us to help sort old junk.
I hadn't been in that attic since I was maybe 12.
Just stepping back into their house brought an unease I couldn't explain, like the walls remembered things I wanted to forget. Marcus was cheerful, pulling down the creaky ladder, ignoring the thick smell of dust and mothballs as we climbed up.
But the moment I stepped into the attic, my chest tightened. I didn't know why.
Maybe it was the heavy boxes. Maybe the air smelled too much like my childhood. Or maybe it was something else. A memory trying to resurface. We split up, and I took the side with the old toys and yellowed books. Marcus headed to the back, near the boarded-up window. I was knee-deep in my childhood when I heard him whisper,
"Don't react.
Wait until your mum leaves."
I froze.
I turned to look at him, but his eyes were glued to a dusty box in his hands, open, revealing something wrapped in plastic and newspaper.
His face had gone pale.
My mom, downstairs in the kitchen, was humming,
blissfully unaware.
Marcus quietly closed the box, slid it back under the beam, and wiped his hands on his jeans. Then, in the calmest voice he could muster, he said, "Let's finish this later. I'm starving."
I nodded slowly, heart thudding. I didn't even ask what he saw. Not yet.
We went downstairs, smiled through tea and biscuits, laughed politely, and left early, saying something about a dinner reservation. But as soon as we got into the car, I turned to him and asked, "What was in the box?" Marcus started the car, looked straight ahead, and whispered, "Something your mom never wanted you to find."
The ride home was silent.
Not the kind of silence that's comfortable, the kind where you're just resting in each other's presence, but a heavy, pulsing silence. One that carries weight.
Questions. Fear.
A storm brewing just beneath your ribs.
I could barely stay in my seat.
I kept wringing my hands, glancing sideways at Marcus.
His jaw was clenched.
Eyes focused straight ahead.
That wasn't like him. Marcus was the calm in every storm.
The voice of reason. The guy who always laughed things off. So when he looked like that, distant, almost afraid, I knew it was bad.
"Marcus," I whispered. "Please.
Tell me." He pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment, letting the rain hammer the windshield like it was buying time for him.
Then, he finally turned to me.
It was a box.
Wooden.
Locked, but the lock was old. I just flipped the latch. Okay? Inside were documents, letters,
a photo album,
newspaper clippings. But it was one thing that made my blood run cold.
What?
A birth certificate.
Yours. My stomach dropped.
What do you mean? I have my birth certificate. No, baby, he said softly. Not the one your mom gave you. The real one.
He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened a photo. And there it was.
A scanned copy of a birth certificate I had never seen before, with my full name, birth date, but the mother listed wasn't Margaret Adams, the woman who raised me.
It was Claire Dawson. And the father? Unknown. I couldn't breathe. I snatched the phone from his hand and zoomed in. The document was old. Yellowed.
Faded edges. But unmistakably real.
"This isn't real," I whispered.
My mom, she told me I was a C-section baby.
That she almost died giving birth to me.
She has photos from the hospital.
She. My voice cracked. Marcus was quiet. "There's more." He unlocked another photo. A newspaper clipping.
Local woman charged with baby theft in 1993.
My heart stopped. The woman's name? Claire Dawson. 22. Former addict.
charged with kidnapping her own biological child from foster care after the state deemed her unfit. There was a blurred image of a woman being arrested outside a courthouse, and a tiny child, maybe 2, being held by a caseworker.
Me?
Marcus, I whispered, my voice barely audible.
What are you saying?
I'm saying, your mother, Margaret, might not be your mother at all.
I don't remember much of that night. Just sobbing, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my childhood like a movie I had never fully understood. The strict rules. The way she never let me ask about my dad.
The time she accidentally burned every photo from my toddler years in a fireplace purge.
The therapists she dismissed. The bruises I always convinced myself were my fault. The way she called me her second chance at perfection after my older brother died. The puzzles were falling into place, and none of them looked like love. The next morning, Marcus and I made a decision. We were going back.
Not to confront her, not yet.
But to get the box. We needed proof. We needed to know everything before we made our move.
When we got to the house, my mother was out for a doctor's appointment.
We had maybe 2 hours. We climbed back into the attic.
Marcus pulled the insulation back again and unearthed the box.
His hands were steady. Mine were shaking so hard I could barely lift the lid. And there it was.
The birth certificate. The newspaper clipping. A court document outlining a custody case I had never heard about. A sealed envelope labeled Claire, final notice. Several photos of me, as a toddler, with a woman I didn't recognize. A woman with sad eyes and the same dimple I had on my left cheek.
Claire. My real mother. There was a journal too. I hesitated. Something about opening it felt like opening my chest, like maybe the version of me I knew would never survive reading it. Marcus gently took my hand.
You don't have to read it now. But I did. The journal was dated 1991. At first, it was just a scared young woman scribbling about her pregnancy, how her boyfriend had left, how her parents kicked her out.
But then,
the social workers say I'm not stable, that I'm a danger to my baby. I made one mistake, O.N.E., when I was 17, and now they want to take her from me forever. They said she's going to be placed with a permanent solution. A family who can give her everything I can't. They say I should forget her name.
My name. But I can't. She's mine. I grew her. I felt her heartbeat before anyone else did. I will get her back.
Even if it kills me. The last entry was dated 2 years later.
I saw her. In the park. With her new mother. She didn't recognize me, but I saw her eyes. She's growing. She's healthy. But that woman? She looked over her shoulder like she knew who I was.
Like she was afraid of me.
They think I'm a threat. They don't understand. I just want to hold her one more time. I was sobbing by the end. The entire attic spun around me.
Everything I'd known about my life, my family, my identity, was collapsing.
And sitting right beneath it was something even worse. My mother knew. She knew the truth all these years. She hid it.
She burned every trace. She lied to the courts, to me, to everyone. And she built an entire life on a foundation of silence and control.
Marcus held me for a long time.
And when I finally pulled away, I wiped my tears and said, I want to find her.
He nodded. And after that,
I'm going to make my mother pay.
Finding Claire wasn't easy. Her name was too common. Too many dead ends. Too many outdated records. But I was obsessed. It was all I could think about. I barely slept. Barely ate.
I would stare at the faded photos from the attic, zooming in on her tired eyes, her trembling smile as she held me, probably for one of the last times. And wonder,
where are you now? Do you even know I exist anymore? Or did you force yourself to forget me just to survive?
Marcus spent every free hour combing through public records.
He was the one who eventually found it.
A record of a woman named Claire Dawson Wells, living just 3 counties away, in a small, unassuming town tucked in the hills. She had changed her name after marrying, briefly, in 2007.
No children. Divorced. No criminal record since her early 20s. Worked at a local library now. It didn't seem real.
My hands trembled as I typed the address into Google Maps. The screen loaded slowly, and when the street view appeared,
I saw it.
A tiny white house with cracked steps, a hummingbird feeder on the porch, and overflowing rose bushes climbing the gate. Something about it felt like home. In a way my mother's mansion never did. The day I decided to meet her, I didn't tell Marcus. I wanted to do it alone. I don't know why, maybe some part of me was afraid that if she saw him, she'd assume I had a full life. That I didn't need her. But I did. Even if just to say the words, "You were never forgotten." I drove 3 hours in silence. Clutched the envelope full of photos and documents in my lap the entire time. My stomach was in knots. What if she slammed the door? What if she didn't remember? What if she was dead inside from all the years of pain? I parked outside the gate and stared at the house for 20 minutes. Then the door opened. She stepped out in a light cardigan, watering can in hand, and started tending to her roses. Same tired eyes. Same dimple on her left cheek. Just like mine. I opened the gate and started walking. Every step felt like I was walking toward the child version of me, the one who used to cry herself to sleep wondering why she never quite felt loved enough. Claire looked up when I got close. She blinked. Stared at me. I saw her lips part slightly. The watering can tilted. Water hit the dirt, slowly spilling out. "Hi," I said softly. I think I'm your daughter." And she dropped the can. She collapsed onto the porch steps, shaking, crying, her hands covering her mouth. I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a long time. We didn't need to. There was a moment, one I'll never forget, where she reached out and touched my face with trembling fingers, as if she was trying to convince herself I wasn't a ghost. "You're real," she whispered. "You're really here." "I found your journal," I said, voice cracking. She hid everything. The woman who raised me. Margaret. Claire flinched at the name. "She told the courts you were unstable. That you didn't want me. That you OD'd. I believed her. For 30 years. Claire choked on a sob. "I didn't OD. I was in rehab. I was clean. But she had money, lawyers, influence. I was a nobody. They said I'd never win." "Why didn't you fight?" "I did," she whispered. "For 5 years. I went broke trying. And then one day, the judge looked at me and said, 'You have to let her go. She won't even remember you.' But I did," I whispered. "I always remembered something was missing. I just didn't know what." We talked for hours. I showed her the photos from the attic. She showed me a box of letters she had written to me but never sent, birthday cards she'd kept buying every year just in case. She knew I loved giraffes. She remembered the exact mole behind my ear. She had never stopped loving me. And by the time the sun set, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Margaret stole my mother from me. And now? I was going to take everything from her. When I got home that night, Marcus met me at the door. He took one look at my face, swollen from tears, eyes shining with both grief and resolve, and pulled me into his arms. "You found her." I nodded, buried my face in his chest. "And I know what we need to do." I wasn't just going to confront Margaret. That would be too easy. No. This was going to be slow. Systematic. She ruined a life. So now, I was going to unravel hers. One secret. One lie. One piece of reputation at a time. Because no one, no matter how powerful, walks away after committing a kidnapping. And this time, she'd be watching her legacy fall to ashes. The thing about people like Margaret is, they always think they've won. They don't worry about consequences, because they've spent their lives avoiding them. Dodging accountability like it's a game. But I was done playing nice. Margaret stole a child. Destroyed a mother. Erased my identity. And built her life, her spotless image, on lies. Now it was time to destroy everything she held dear. But I had to be smart. Precise. Because people like her? They don't crumble with confrontation. They collapse with exposure. The next morning, Marcus and I sat at the kitchen table, laying everything out. The photos. The documents. The journal. The newspaper article. And Claire's handwritten statement, a raw, heart-wrenching letter detailing everything Margaret had done. We needed 3 things. 1. Proof, documents, dates, stories that couldn't be explained away. 2. Witnesses, anyone from the past who might still remember. 3. Pressure, a way to make the walls cave in, both legally and socially. 1. Documentation. Marcus scanned and backed up every document into encrypted cloud folders. Then we went a step further, mailed copies to 2 trusted friends in case anything ever happened to the originals. "We don't just want the truth," Marcus said, sliding the USB across the table. We want it to be undeniable. 2. Witnesses. We started tracking down people who might have been around during the custody battle. One name stood out in the journal, Ellen Bright, Claire's former social worker. I found her on Facebook, now retired and living in a retirement community just 20 miles from Margaret's house.
I reached out. She agreed to meet.
Ellen was in her late 70s now, frail but sharp. She greeted us with gentle eyes and a long, knowing sigh. I always wondered if you'd come looking, she said as we sat across from her in the nursing home's sunroom. You remember me?
Of course I do. You were the quietest toddler I'd ever met. Always clinging to Claire's neck like she was your lifeline. And she was.
My throat tightened. Then why did they take me away? Ellen's expression turned bitter.
Politics. Money.
Your grandmother, Margaret's mother, was a donor to a state senator.
Claire didn't stand a chance.
The court said Margaret could offer a better future. They never cared what that meant emotionally. Did you know she wasn't legally allowed to adopt me?
No, but it wouldn't surprise me. That woman always thought rules were suggestions.
I tried to fight for Claire, but I was just a voice.
No power.
Would you be willing to make a statement?
Marcus asked gently. If we took this to court.
Ellen looked between us.
Then she nodded, slow and solemn. I'll help however I can.
That girl deserved her baby.
3. Pressure. Margaret thrived on reputation.
She wasn't just a mother. She was Margaret Adams, founding member of the city's Historical Society, chair of 3 charity boards, regular speaker at church events about moral strength and family values.
Hypocrisy wrapped in pearls. So we started chipping at her foundation. Marcus created an anonymous blog,
titled, What Margaret Adams Stole. It started small, 1 post a week.
Each post shared a piece of my story. Carefully worded. Redacted where needed. But powerful.
I grew up in a home that felt cold, even when it was warm. My real mother wrote me letters for years I never saw. The woman who raised me lied to a court to steal me. It went unnoticed at first. Until we shared the blog with key members of her social circle, anonymously, of course.
Through burner emails.
Printed pamphlets left at her charity events.
The ripple effect was immediate.
Margaret called me 3 days after the 5th post. I didn't answer.
She texted. We need to talk. Now.
I let her wait 48 hours.
Then I responded. Don't worry.
There's more to come. The next day, I received an email from one of her board directors. Hi, I'm reaching out because a member of our charity is under scrutiny.
Your story has shaken many of us.
If this is true, we support you.
It was working.
The lie she lived inside was cracking, one whisper at a time.
But I wasn't done. There was one more move. And it would be public. I sat down with a lawyer.
Not for a lawsuit, not yet. But to file for a legal identity correction. The state still listed Margaret Adams as my mother.
I wanted that changed.
Do you have documentation of a fraudulent adoption? The clerk asked.
Not yet, I said.
But I have evidence.
And witnesses.
This might open a legal investigation into your mother, he warned.
Good, I said.
A few weeks later, the paperwork was in.
My name didn't change. But my legal mother did.
It now read, Claire Dawson. I mailed Margaret a copy.
No note.
No explanation.
Just the form. She showed up at my door the next day, livid. She stood on my porch like she had every right to be there. Hair perfectly styled. Gold brooch gleaming.
That same mask of control she'd worn my whole life, the one that said, I am above this. But her eyes, they were wild. She held the envelope in one hand, the one with the corrected legal identity form, and she waved it like it was a loaded gun.
What is this? She spat. I stepped onto the porch. Calm.
Unmoving. It's my birthright, I said softly.
The truth.
You remember what that is, right?
Her nostrils flared. You ungrateful little girl.
After everything I did for you.
You kidnapped me. She froze.
For the first time in my life, Margaret Adams, the woman who ruled every room, every dinner table, every inch of my childhood, didn't have a response.
Just a flinch. That's not how it happened. You lied to the courts. You buried my real mother's letters. You raised me like I was your second chance, not a person.
A project.
She was a drug addict.
You would have been dead by now if I hadn't stepped in.
No, I said, eyes narrowing. She was a mother.
One who never stopped loving me, even when you made it impossible for her to reach me.
Her voice cracked. I gave you everything. A home. School.
A future. And this is how you repay me?
You didn't give me anything. You took something. And now it's time for you to lose.
She stepped forward, towering, trying to intimidate me like she always had.
But I didn't flinch. I wasn't the scared little girl in frilly dresses anymore.
I was the woman she had tried to erase, and failed. I can ruin you, she hissed.
Do you know how many people believe me?
How many friends I still have?
Fewer every day, I replied.
And after next week, even fewer.
She paused.
What happens next week?
I smiled. A press release. About a woman who stole a child and lied about it for 30 years.
The blog posts were just the beginning.
Her face went pale. You wouldn't dare.
Watch me. She stormed off the porch, furious, shaking, but something in her step had changed.
For the first time, Margaret knew she had lost control.
Over the next week, things escalated.
Fast.
I contacted a reporter from a major digital outlet, someone who had already been sniffing around after our anonymous blog went viral on TikTok. She wanted to do a story.
A deep dive. And I gave her everything. Photos of the forged documents. Claire's journal.
Ellen's testimony. A scanned copy of the adoption paperwork, which, upon legal review, turned out to be completely fabricated. We even hired a private investigator who confirmed that no legal adoption ever took place. Margaret had simply taken me in under the guise of permanent guardianship and never followed through with legal channels.
She never thought she had to. Because people like her?
They don't think rules apply to them.
But now? The rules were knocking at her door.
3 days before the article dropped, Margaret's lawyer called me. Miss Dawson, he began nervously. My client would like to request that you cease further public defamation. Tell your client, I said slowly, that she can either confess to what she did or watch the world tear her image apart one pixel at a time. You do realize this could result in a criminal investigation. I'm counting on it. When the article hit, it was everywhere. Beneath the pearls, how a local socialite stole a baby and built a life of lies. Decades-old adoption fraud surfaces after secret attic discovery shatters family legacy.
The comments flooded in. People were shocked, outraged, disgusted.
Her social club dropped her. Church committees pulled her name from upcoming events. 2 of her nonprofit boards publicly distanced themselves from her. And then, like a final nail in the coffin, a formal investigation was launched by the state.
She went into hiding after that. But it wasn't enough for me. Because there was still one thing she hadn't lost. Her money. Her mansion. Her comfort. So I went after that next.
Margaret thought silence would save her.
She always had.
But silence wasn't going to save her this time. Because this time, the woman she stole from had found her voice.
And her daughter? She'd learned to use it like a weapon. It started with a letter.
From Claire's attorney, sent certified to Margaret's home, her personal lawyer, and the State Department. Petition for civil damages and wrongful custody interference.
It wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a statement.
You don't get to bury people and walk away clean. The suit named wrongful termination of parental rights, custodial interference, fraudulent misrepresentation to the court, emotional distress and psychological harm to both mother and child. And here's the kicker. Because Margaret had never filed a legal adoption, only manipulated temporary guardianship into permanence, she had no statute of limitation protection.
We had everything on our side.
Ellen's sworn affidavit. Claire's medical history proving sobriety at the time of separation.
The journal. The false paperwork. And now, a growing public chorus demanding justice.
Margaret's lawyer tried to settle.
Of course.
Our client is prepared to offer $80,000 in exchange for a full NDA and drop charges.
Claire didn't even blink. She stole 30 years of my life.
That's not for sale.
The silence in the room was thick.
We'll see you in court, I said.
But court was months away. So in the meantime, I kept squeezing. I knew how to hurt Margaret where it really mattered. Her money, her name, her throne. She lived off the illusion of virtue. And illusions are fragile.
So I reached out to every major organization she was involved in.
Local Historical Society. 3 charity boards. A scholarship program she funded in her name. A private Christian women's circle that worshipped her like a second Mother Teresa. I sent them all polite, respectful emails. In light of the recent revelations about Margaret Adams' long-standing involvement in a fraudulent custodial case involving my biological mother, I felt it necessary to ensure you had access to the verified public documents currently being investigated. I attached PDFs. I didn't even have to make threats. Her legacy did the rest. One by one, I watched her empire crack. She was removed from every board, disinvited from 2 fundraisers, and, most painfully, had her name stripped from the annual Adams Women in Service scholarship she created in her own honor. They renamed it the Claire Dawson Resilience Fund. I swear, I saw fire behind her eyes when she found out. But the true breaking point came when the Attorney General announced formal charges were under review. Kidnapping. Custodial interference. Fraud. Even though the crimes were old, public pressure had mounted. The AG's office opened an investigation to determine if any criminal liability remains. Margaret's lawyer immediately filed motions. She's elderly, frail, confused. She's evil, I corrected. Not confused. The media had a field day. There was even a podcast episode. Headline: The Woman Who Stole a Daughter, a deep dive into the Margaret Adams case. And for once, people were listening to Claire. Not Margaret. Not lawyers. Not society's darling in pearls. But Claire Dawson, the woman who was deemed unfit because she was poor and scared and alone. I watched her speak on a panel about maternal rights 6 months later. She stood at that podium, hand trembling slightly, eyes glassy, and said, "They told me I wasn't good enough to be a mother. But I was never given a chance. Now, I'm standing here because my daughter fought for me. And because the truth matters, even after 30 years. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Margaret refused to attend the final court date. Her attorney pleaded for a private resolution. But the judge ruled in Claire's favor. $2.4 million in damages. Claire didn't even smile. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "That won't give me back what she stole. But it gives me peace." Margaret lost everything. The house? Sold to cover legal fees. Her savings? Wiped. Her social circle? Gone. She now lived in a condo 2 towns over, the same one she used to mock for being where people go when they've failed. She rarely left. Never spoke to anyone. And when her name came up in conversation, people whispered like it was a curse. And me? I finally stopped having nightmares about her. I stopped flinching at the smell of her perfume. Stopped hearing her voice when I made a mistake. Stopped doubting my worth every time I looked in the mirror. One day, Claire and I were sitting in her garden, drinking tea, watching the sun set behind the old oak tree. She turned to me and said, "You know, I used to pray you'd come find me, but I never imagined you'd save me." I took her hand. "You didn't need saving, Mom. You just needed to be heard." Margaret always believed she could bury the truth under years of control, silence, and manipulation, but the attic betrayed her. The DNA test results were irrefutable. And the photograph, that one frozen moment in time of my mother and me at the hospital before I vanished, was the final nail in Margaret's coffin. When I handed everything over to Lisa, my biological mother, her hands trembled as she held the evidence. Decades of heartbreak finally had a reason. The missing pieces, the haunting silence, the lost years, all explained by one woman's desperate desire to steal what wasn't hers. Margaret's arrest shook the community. Her picture-perfect reputation collapsed overnight. She pleaded, denied, screamed, but the proof was ironclad. She was charged with kidnapping, falsifying documents, and obstruction. My dad, who genuinely hadn't known the full truth, filed for divorce and cut all contact. As for me, I stood with Lisa in court the day Margaret was sentenced. Lisa held my hand, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "You brought me justice. And you brought me back my daughter." Margaret was taken away in cuffs. No makeup. No pearls. No control. Just a thief who finally got caught. And I was free. Some betrayals cut deeper than others, especially when they come from someone you trusted to protect you. But sometimes, justice doesn't come from rage. It comes from truth. And when you stand in your truth, no lie, no matter how carefully constructed, can survive the light. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe, because we have more real, jaw-dropping revenge stories coming your way every week. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you found out your entire childhood was stolen by someone you called mom? Until next time, remember, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes, it whispers from an attic.